So, we were discussing the difference between controlled practice and freer practice. And among the clear differences between controlled practice and freer practice, we've got the aim of each of these instances. Controlled practice aims at accuracy, whereas freer practice aims at fluency. And of course, controlled practice is a little bit more scaffolded, a little bit more guided, whereas freer practice allows students to move more freely with language. And after the practice stage, after controlled practice and freer practice, there is a very important stage in the lesson called the application stage. We will be exploring application in depth in Module 3, but let me tell you what application is about. Application has to do with giving students the possibility to use what they have just learned in a task that somehow resembles what they would be doing with language in the real world. So basically, the difference between practice and application has to do with the fact that in the practice stage, we give students more activities, whereas in the application stage, we give students tasks. Tasks in which students will have to use language to solve an issue. The characteristics of tasks is that they are communicative and that students will definitely be doing something with language they might also do in the real world. The question again remains, how do we do this remotely? And last but not least, we get to the end of a lesson with a stage called the review and the follow-up. It's really very important when we get to the end of a lesson that we engage students in a quick review to tie up the lesson and to check if actually they were able to get to where we wanted to go, language-wise, of course. It's a moment of assessment, mostly, a moment in which I get to assess what my students can do, and students can also reflect upon whether they can do it or if they have found difficulties, etc. Review and follow-up as a stage will also be seen in depth in Module 3. And of course, we will also be answering the question, how do we do this remotely? So I need to go a little back to what we discussed in Module 1 and the very many challenges that we educators are facing today. In normal circumstances, all these stages that we have discussed would be the stages of a lesson that I would have face-to-face with my students. So the biggest challenge today is that we don't have those lessons. And if we do, they are versions of those face-to-face lessons. Even if you have the possibility, even if you have technology at your disposal and you can have virtual lessons, it's not the same, and we all know that. So the biggest change is that moment, all these moments that we have been mentioning, the warm-up, the lead-in, the elicitation stage, the moment when we present something and they practice it, all these things would normally take place in the classroom, and today that is not happening. So I think it's really very important that we understand the challenges. So this is why you've got those images on the screen. We are not there in the classroom, and they are not there in the classroom with us. We are in different places, and this teaching and learning is occurring remotely. So I would like to go back to a quote from Module 1. When we discussed what homework is, we mentioned that homework is an extension of instruction. But this is not the case in quarantine times. Homework is not an extension of what actually happened inside the classroom. Homework actually is instruction in quarantine times, and that changes everything. It's not an extension any longer. It has replaced instruction at times. So if that is the case, which are the implications? Well, that means that homework, if it is not an extension of instruction, well, then homework needs to have the same stages of a lesson. If students are not learning face-to-face with me, then homework needs to have some characteristics of self-study guides, as we mentioned in Module 1. Another very big implication is that homework will need to carefully guide students smoothly from one stage to the other one. And last but not least, we need to remember that homework will need to lower the affective filter and consider, I would say, more than ever before, our students' emotions. We discussed quite a lot in Module 1 what's happening in many homes these days. Students are overwhelmed with their assignments. Parents do not know how to help, and emotions are playing a very counterproductive role in our students' learning. We ourselves as teachers are also going through emotional rough times. So we probably need to rethink homework in terms of all this new reality. So this is what we are going to do today. I have highlighted from our aims for the session. What is it that we are going to plunge into now? I've called it remote tasks, the beginning. So in this video and the subsequent mini videos in Module 2, we will be discussing what to take into consideration when designing remote tasks. So we are going to focus our attention now on the very beginning of our homework or remote tasks or self-study guides. Remember that I told you that the same stages that we would normally have in a lesson will need to be part of those assignments that we are sending students. That is to say, they will need to have a lead-in or a warmer. They will need to have an elicitation stage. And of course, that presentation, which we would normally do face-to-face in the classroom with our students, that presentation is going to take place remotely too. So we are going to take a look at what is it that we need to bear in mind. So how can we do this? Well, we've got two very clear case scenarios here, which we also addressed in Module 1. The first scenario has to do with whether technology is available. If technology is available, and I mentioned this in Module 1 too, you probably do want to give some virtual classes. Just bear in mind that if your lessons had a given length and if they had certain characteristics when they were face-to-face lessons, virtual lessons will not have the same characteristics. The moment we understand that, we will have lots of chances of planning effective virtual classes. So if technology is by your side, you may probably give virtual classes, or you might even want to record yourself giving classes, which is what I've done for you now. You can also resort to tutorials. There's plenty of online tutorials. They are short, quick. There's a little bit of everything online, so you will have to find high quality tutorials, or you can create tutorials yourself. Online videos that you consider very well present or teach or demonstrate something, web pages, songs, online games, and the array of online resources available. Again, there's a little bit of everything there in the internet, so you need to be careful with what you will be using. So if technology is available, the chances are very many, and of course, those resources will never replace us. We make those decisions as for what to include in the remote tasks or not. And then, of course, there's this scenario where we say, okay, technology is not available. And there are lots of schools, and I know this because I talk to lots of teachers these days, lots of schools for which teachers are preparing handouts, and every 15 days, parents have the opportunity to go to school and fetch the material for students to work on. So many teachers are, regardless of technology, still give assignments to the kids or self-study guides, etc. So one way or another, technology will never, ever, ever replace methodology. So whether you do it through technology or whether you do it without technology, the question remains that we have to rethink ourselves methodologically speaking. And this is what we will be doing in all these modules and with the help of all these mini videos. So it's really very important, and this is something that I mentioned in Module 1, know your students' reality and know your own. Offer alternatives. You know that, for example, there are families that do not even have a cell phone, and this is a fact. There are families that might have a cell phone, but be careful. If you're going to send anything for students to use their cell phone, make sure that students can use that, but avoid abuse. What does that mean? Bear in mind that they are probably sharing the device with any other member of the family. So make sure that whatever they will have to use the cell phone for is short and sweet. What can we do with very limited or without technology in order to include a lead-in or a warmer and elicitation moment remotely? So how can we make sure that our remote tasks or assignments have a lead-in, a warmer, or elicitation moment? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of things that really work very well, both if you're going to have a face-to-face lesson, but also remotely. Remember that the lead-in or the warmer has very clear objectives. This stage of the lesson contextualizes, sets the tone, lowers the affective filter, it's got some predictability, it engages the students, and it helps the students connect personally with what they will be learning. So a good first example is that you can get started with a personal story or a personal anecdote. So for example, you can share something that has happened to you, or about your weekend, or what you do every day, or who your favorite singer is, or if you have a hobby. Whatever the lesson is going to be about, you get it started with a personal anecdote. Telling your story as a teacher first has a number of benefits. You will be exposing the students to English. You are modeling. Students will be listening to you or reading you, and you will be demonstrating what is it that students can do afterwards. So usually including a personal anecdote or a personal story as a starter to break the ice is usually a very good thing to do. Something that you can do in class or something that you can do remotely with your students. So now we are going to move on to video 3, and we will keep on exploring lots of other alternatives for the lead-in or warmer moment of your lesson.